conversation as we go through. So we can take many breaks to hear from you as we share content, maybe even more than what we've built in, because we do have the extra space with just with a smaller group here today. So welcome, and we are here to discuss Stronger Together, which is a framework for engaging families and partnering with families within the educational system, or for whatever programming that you're doing. And then within that partnership, how do we link families to learning? How do we do that work to get families as partners in learning with us? So we'll be talking a lot about what are some of those pieces. And I don't know, Lisa, if you wanted to give us just a few words of welcome.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, thinking families, think if we're talking about wellness and safety, families can be, such great partners with working with the schools. So we'll be talking about more why, but thinking about trauma, just the resiliency factors, what we're looking to pull in along with that knowledge. So looking forward to talking to you all about that. And the linking to learning is really about making those families true partners in their teaching of the kids. Because who knows kids better than the parents, right? Although the teachers can pick up on clues pretty quick, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Lisa. So as you see, we have some pictures of some little kiddos in their environment playing, being happy. And then on to the next slide, we'll just do a quick introduction to who is here. My name's Claudia. I'm the person making a funny face right there in the middle. And what we really wanted to show with this picture here is that we're all, we're all part of a family group, and here's mine. And I'm really close with my two sisters. We talk pretty regularly, and they're a big formative part of me and of growing up together. And so we're all nestled within our family groups. We all learn from our family groups. And so they're really important. And so we wanted to kind of show that. But I'm Claudia. I have 7 siblings, so you can imagine what my household was like growing up, pretty chaotic. And I'm lucky enough that I was able to do work with both students, young people, and with families. And so I get to really work with their whole selves at times. And I've been part of a lot of youth programming where I've gotten to know youth really, really well. And what I find is that when you do link to what they know and what they care about and who they are, all else melts away. Some of those barriers that we think are there melt away for us. So I just kind of wanted to say, and it is because we're honoring their whole selves. And here we are too, as our whole selves.
Good morning. Kunye Kuhatua Kagwantan Ayafat, Dactin Tanyeri Ayafat, and Huna Kau Ayafat. My finger name is Kunye. I also go by Lisa. I am the Eagle Moiety Kagwantan clan from Huna Kau and a child of the Dactin. That's how we're matrilineal. So we acknowledge our father's clan by saying we are a child of, and then we name the clan. So I'm a child of the Dactin. I'm the oldest of 4 sisters, no brothers. My dad was one of 7 brothers, no sisters. So go figure. I think he had a lot of karma with women is what I think. But that's a whole different story. I grew up here in Juneau, and then I raised my kids, also went through the Juneau schools. And as they did, I volunteered and worked in the schools in one capacity or another for about 16 years. About 12 of them in the schools, in the classrooms, as a volunteer, as a substitute teacher, serving on the site councils, and then eventually serving on our Juneau School Board, running and serving on our Juneau School Board. So a lot of different perspectives, but definitely the one I'm bringing most forward today is my role, as an engaged family member. And also when I switched to the policy side, I was recognizing how important that partnership is. And then I got to work briefly at the Capitol as a legislative staffer, and then I got lucky and somehow ended up here at the AASB with this staff. So good morning. Looking forward to going through this session with you.
And good morning. My name is Tyler, and that's a picture of myself and my partner Disney down at Sandy Beach, which I'm looking out on right now. And before I got here to AASB, I was actually working as a teacher for study abroad programs with the high school to undergraduate level. And one of the things that really stood out to me in those contexts was, I mean, you get to know just how much really falls into what is on your student's plate when you're living with them in that context. I mean, it's beyond the classroom. It's so much of like everything that they're eating and what's going on like in their sleeping patterns and what's going on with their friends. And their families are a huge, huge part of that. And just everything that's going on back home and on their plate right in front of you. So there's that family connection is a huge piece of it. So I'm glad that we're diving into that today.
Thanks so much, Tyler. So again, welcome. We wanted to also welcome you into the space. And since we're just a few of us here today, could you tell us your name and where you are calling from, either in the chat or verbally? So let's see who.
My name is Deborah Fitzgerald, and I'm calling in from Fairbanks. And I am working with families, homeschooling families. So trying to connect, and lots of very anxious parents. And we had just such a huge amount of families that are coming in and going, because we just started in person in Fairbanks in January. And so now some are going and some are coming, and it's a pretty chaotic year, and connecting and kind of reducing the stress. You know, families are trying to work at home and have kids at home, as you know. So that's why I'm doing. I could click my video for a second, but I'm having, if I'm not responding or something, I don't have the best, here I am. I'm at home, but I don't have the best internet, so I'll keep my video off for now.
Okay, well, thank you for letting us see your face, putting a face to a name. Good to see you, Deborah.
Okay.
My name is Amaret Payment, and I work as a community nutrition educator for the UAF Cooperative Extension Service, and I'm located in the Central Kenai Peninsula area. And one of the challenges of my job has been, kind of touched on what Deborah said, where families are working and learning at home. So they're kind of burned out and don't necessarily seek out those opportunities for something like nutrition education, which can kind of be a snooze fest if it's not done the right way. So just looking to increase ways to engage families.
Thanks so much. And we'll talk a little bit more. You all talked a little bit about your challenges, especially during this time. So there's probably more. We're going to talk about those too. And then I see an introduction here from Julie. Julie, feel free to unmute and share. If not, I can also read it.
I was clicking my picture to unmute. It's not like I haven't been doing counseling on Zoom for a year, and I still sometimes have issues with technology. Hi, my name is Julie. I am new to Anchorage, but not new to Alaska. This is my 8th year of working in schools as a school-based mental health counselor, primarily based in elementary schools. I worked in Nome and in Homer, and am now placed here with Volunteers of America at Tyson Elementary. And I would say COVID challenge was just moving during this whole pandemic, still having a place in Homer, trying to create a community in Anchorage, and kiddos coming back and trying to identify what services we can actually provide in this limited face-to-face time we have with them. So I'm really excited. I think there's going to be a lot of family engagement here this next quarter. And so, yeah, I'm excited to learn and be part of a community again.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I feel very lucky to have you all here. One of the things that we'll talk about is sort of our agreements for our time together. And it's not on this slide here, but or at least this agreement, these are adapted from the First Alaskans agreements, and they're also, you can also see that there's the Southeast traditional values alongside as well, since we're here on Auke land. And one of the first, which is not on here, but one of the first Alaskans agreements is that in every chair is a leader. And so I'm really looking forward to really hearing from each of you and for us to learn together, because there's so much that we can gather and share when we are able to have this space together. So as we get started, we just wanted to kind of set the space for ourselves, particularly just to acknowledge that you have a lot of expertise and knowledge as you come into the room. And as we try to share what we know with each other, to speak with care, speak to be understood, and listen to understand. And that really gets us further, especially since we all can bring so much to the table when we're able to share.
The next value that we have there, and if you look at the FAI agreements, their list is much longer. This is kind of an abbreviated one, but we thought we'd bring in some of the key ones, although they all bring a really important element. This one, I paired the FAI with the Southeast tradition of listening well and with respect, which is similar to FAI's valuing our time together, being present and engaged. I think being present and being engaged, we know that we're all very busy and our minds can be everywhere thinking of all the things that need to be done, that have to be done. But thank you for choosing to be here today, to put some focus and thought and conversation with your peers, really. I mean, with us, but it's your peers, I think, where you will get some of the best sharing and conversation. So we appreciate you being present and being engaged and with us today.
And holding each other up. This is a safe place for meaningful conversation. We have many challenges in our roles and in the work that we do. And being able to share and being able to be honest and bring those forward with other people really helps us to support each other through those. And so this is a safe place to ask those questions that have been on your mind, or to bring up a topic that you're not sure how to handle. And we're here to support each other. So this is a safe place for that. And whatever we share here, we will keep to here. It is about our learning and not about sharing or bringing that somewhere else.
Thank you. I see Deborah asked what FAI is, and all these acronym soups. So thank you for asking. First Alaskans Institute, which is located there in Anchorage. They do a lot of really great equity work and do a lot of like community dialogues and other types of work. And with it, they open up their sessions always with these agreements. So I abbreviated First Alaskans Institute, FAI. Our humor does help us, of course it has an appropriate time and place. But sometimes I have I've been in some really, I think with education, we all care. I think of all the different professions. Education seems to be full of a lot of people who care deeply about our kids. Most people who come to this work do it because they have a passion for working with kids and trying to help them prepare them for life. And it can be really heavy at times, but I've also been in those conversations as we talk about it, where, after sharing some really heavy stuff, maybe around trauma engaged schools, where someone then shared a story with some levity, which, is nice. Everyone could laugh, like that, laughing together, not at, and it helped, kind of take a breath, let go, and then kind of continue the conversation. So our humor does help us, and sometimes that's the only thing we can have. It's at least our sense of humor.
And be strong in mind, body, and spirit. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. We hope that you'll take a break if you need one, or that you'll check in on each other if needed, or if somebody's struggling. We're really here to take care of each other and also do the things that you need to take care of yourself during this time. So we know it's 2 hours, we'll build in a break, but we also know that you may need to take some time and take care of business, whatever's going on for you. So feel free to do that. But I do want to say, when we've used these agreements in a lot of different settings, and they work really well with families as well. So if you're having a conversation with families, or you know, a group of parents or something like that, setting the space can in some ways get rid of some of those power dynamics with teachers or with other professional education professionals. And so it can set the space so that families can say, oh, I am an expert too. And also, you know, you as a teacher, listen deeply, and same with the family. So really setting the space can be something that's helpful as you do your work with families as well, so that it's really understood how to engage in that space, and some of those internal things are less likely to come up. And so next, I wanted to just briefly cover the agenda. We will be talking about key relationship building components to family partnerships and how that is linked to learning, how relationships can really get us to learning. And then we will also be exploring a couple of systemic ways for you to build relationships and then to link to that learning. So building relationships first and then linking to learning. And then we'll be doing some small group discussions and sharing out our resources.
We already started this. Thank you. We got an introduction. We know some of your communities, if you'd like, you could still put that in there. I remember one of you is down around Kenai, one of you is in Anchorage, and Emirates. Anyway, I'm trying to remember.
Fairbanks, I think.
Fairbanks. Okay, with the UAS and our UAA extension. But so if you would like to help us out, you can put rename and put in the chat box. Either, well, one of you put it in the chat box. We can also rename. But you shared your roles. Some of you have. Actually, each of you have. And some of you actually already shared some of your challenges during the time of COVID. If you have another you'd like to share, you may. Or perhaps you have some success that you would like to share with us. We're in a small group. You know, we've done this conversation where we've had closer to 20 and 30, and so that's why we have the chat. But with this small group, we would love to bring your voices into the circle with each other. So right here, well, I think we'll focus on 3. And if you'd like to, if something else has come to mind on another one of those challenges, or some of your successes in partnering with families during this time, please feel free to share.
Julie, I see you've unmuted.
I want to focus on the success because I've spent a lot of time thinking about the challenges. But I think, you know, being less accessible or only accessible via technology has really helped families, at least with the kiddos that I work with, highlight their own personal abilities and strengths and communities outside of the traditional school and mental health facilities and things like that. And so like, that's been really encouraging. Like they're stronger than they thought. They're getting through this for the most part. And, you know, what a great base of strength to work from when they are able to participate again in the traditional helping roles that we have. So that's encouraging to me. Like I've seen my students be far more successful than anyone really anticipated in a lot of ways. Yeah, so that's the strength.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, indeed. It is interesting. I think it really brings our whole selves, doesn't it? You know, I think the way that the number of times people would engage and how they engage was probably spread farther out in between. And so technology in some ways, even though we're apart, ironically, we are kind of connecting in very different ways. And maybe more frequently and with our whole selves. You know, here we are, how many meetings we've been having where, you know, not been uncommon, honestly, in a business meeting to see colleagues, you know, with their kids climbing on, because, you know, we're all doing the same thing. We're all, you know, working and also helping our kids through school. So I think, you know, on one hand, it is a distraction, it is stress, but it is also a good reminder that we have our whole selves. And when we recognize this, it kind of brings this whole humanity and connection between all of us. Thank you for sharing that, Julie. Emirate, I also saw that you unmuted, so you thought of something that you would like to share with us, feel free if you'd like still.
I can unmute. The disclaimer would be I have a rambunctious puppy in the background, so if it gets noisy, I'll just do the chat. I did say in the chat, I work a lot in the classroom, mostly elementary classrooms, because my grant limits me to working in Title I schools. It's a income eligibility. And because of university requirements and COVID restrictions, I've been teaching remotely for going on a year now. And even though students can be gathered in the classroom now in our area, I'm still remote. And I discovered that I really miss those kids. When everybody was remote, it didn't way, but now I find that I'm the one experiencing Zoom burnout, and I wasn't before. And so I realized I really fed off the energy of being in that room. And so part of, I think, a challenge for keeping families engaged is, for me personally, going to be keeping my energy up and making my topics interested to them and interesting to me, and just maintaining that.
Thank you for sharing that, Emma. That is a challenge, you know, and I think, you know, even as a parent, my kids now, the photos that you saw with my husband and me with my husband and kids, they are grown. And, you know, they're adults and in college, but, you know, they find themselves feeling fatigued, having a harder time to focus. And I remind them that this is a pandemic, you know, like, okay, we're mostly doing okay, you know, day to day, most days we're like, okay, we have routine, we know how to do this, we're safe, you know, we can do those mental checks, but some days it does feel like a grind, doesn't it? And we are social beings. So, you know, reminding them that it's okay, that we have some tough days, but also recognizing how are you doing to care for yourself, that self-care piece, so that you can keep, you know, doing what you need to do day to day, be it schoolwork as a student or doing your lessons and connecting. So recognizing that. So thank you for sharing that. And that's, I would say that that's probably true for most people, if not every day, at least some days. Thank you. Welcome, Marjorie. We have been doing an introduction, and since you're new, I will invite you. You can turn on your camera or maybe just unmute yourself anyhow. We at least see a photo there. But if you can share your name, your district or school, and what role you have, you know, if you're not in a classroom. And you can also, if you want a little more time to think on the last question, you can come back. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the first couple I bet you can answer very easily, of course. But we're also sharing what have been some of your biggest challenges or successes in partnering with families during COVID. So welcome, Marjorie.
Okay, good morning. I'm Margie Kersty. I teach second grade here at the Freddie Pollock Elementary School up in Barrow. And we're opening up next week, finally, almost after a year. So I've been contacting my parents, just want to find out how many of their children they're letting back into school. Well, so far, 6 parents are keeping their young ones at home because they just want their families to be safe at the moment. And we live so far up here. It's real cold out there today. I had to come to school with my snow pants on. I wear my parka, too cold. And then the biggest challenges this year was I had to learn how to use all these technology tools. It's a good thing our district provide us with so much technology tools in our classroom. I'm not a technology person, but I sure had to learn how to use them to try and teach. It was so different. It was just like being a new teacher all over again, and had to use my document camera, and we have a little scanner in our classroom so we can just scan our once you make copies for each of our reading units or math units, and then whatever else we're sending home, the different arts around the holidays, and scan them. And then we had to create and really work on our 2 teacher web pages, and how to use Google Classroom, and how to upload all these lessons. And we had to record ourselves. Geez. We have a nice big whiteboard screen in our room, so I had to work around with that. And then they, like right around before Christmas, they gave each of us teachers their own printers, so we don't have to go touch around the other printers in our building. And so it's nice, we could just print whatever we want to print. And another challenging part was trying to, like when I call my kids, I tried calling them in the morning, but no one would answer. They'd still be sleeping. So all their times are all messed up. So I had to work around the afternoon part, contacting parents, and they would tell me their times are all messed up. So everybody's times are all backwards. And so hopefully everybody's trying to get back into their regular schedule of, getting up early and coming to school next week. And I felt the successes during this time was I became more real good at communicating with parents more. Because I've been up here for 22 years, and I remember in the past I tried to call some parents, and it would take it would be challenging to get a hold of some, but some are real supportive. We'd have really long discussions, really long Zoom times with the parent after, working with their child, and because they were staying home too and working from home, and not really going out talking to nobody, just staying at home, try to be safe. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. We can very much imagine how that is, because I think it's similar and different. There you are in Utqiagvik, and I bet you, Deborah, Julie, and Amaret, who are sprinkled throughout South Central Alaska and Kenai, Anchorage, Fairbanks area, would probably relate to a lot of that. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so thank you for giving us a sense of who you are and acknowledging some of those successes and challenges, including technology and connecting with families in new and different ways, your students. So the next slide. Thank you. Just briefly going to touch on this, just saying that family partnership is a success factor for all. There are many, if this were, we don't want to put focus on this if we were setting some of the context, but just know that the family partnership has a lot of research behind it, both here in the state and nationally. And, just consistently what we know for a fact is that if families are involved, kids do better. They get the content, they have support with their learning, their behavior tends to be better. They tend to just overall be able to manage it much better. Just understanding how to get help. And so, they participate in less risky behavior if the parents are engaged. So there are all kinds of different studies that show all these different areas. If you have high parent involvement, kids do better. So you're just going to take our word for it. We're going to concisely put that in one little slide. But if you were to Google that, you would find this to be true. So, but we want to move on. Here, we're sharing a quote. I know how to get, this mother shared, I know how to get, I imagine Travis is her son. I know how to get Travis to help at home, but I was just not sure how to help at school. I wasn't even sure if my help was wanted. Then one year, she's a teacher, gave me lots of tricks to help Travis, and I was able to give her some too. What I had mentioned at the start as we were talking is, figuring out that whole partnership, since parents know their kids so well, they will probably understand what kind of tricks help them stay focused, what motivates them, for learning. They can give you a heads up if they are really struggling. And if you have that good comfort level and relationship with your parents, they will be comfortable in reaching out to you when they know their kids are struggling. If their students aren't willing and able, the parents can then become a great ally and help support their students and be that communication link. And conversely, of course, that you will be that for them. So going on to the next slide.
So one thing we heard, and we heard from lots and lots of educators, was that they see the link. That oftentimes we really see the link when we have a student, we're able to connect to their whole self. We see the link when we can link to their families, when their families are linked to us and we have a good relationship with those families. But we may not all know how to get there with every family. And we hear lots of educators say, I got so many classes on how to teach math or how to do these particular parts of my job, but I never got training on how to do engaging and partnering with families. I don't know how to quite do that. And it works for some families, and then I can't really make it happen for others. And so how do I do that in a way that's equitable to all families? And so this resource here was created in response to that. And it was also created in response to the idea that there was a lot of research out there and it wasn't focused on Alaska. It didn't bring up cultural responsiveness. If you're going to be doing work in our communities, cultural responsiveness is key. We did some things with the dual capacity framework when we were first looking at this, and relationships are huge, but relationships were kind of somewhere mixed in there, and we brought relationship forward. In Alaska or in our small communities, relationships are key. So this is a tool that we will be using. A lot of the content we'll be using has come from this framework, and it was created for Alaskan educators with Alaskan educators. And so when we look at what's contained within that resource, educators, when we were working with them, they considered these to be the building blocks of doing family partnership work in Alaska. It may look a little different in your community, but some of these things you probably are already doing to try to link to partnerships. And so what we're going to be covering today is that link to learning in place. How do we link to learning in place, particularly now? It's a challenge. And I don't know how many of you are aware of Zaretta Hammond's work, but she says connecting with families is great and doing these pieces are great and connecting to students in a real way, but it has to lead to good outcomes for students, whether that's emotional outcomes, academic outcomes. And so we want to link that partnership to learning so that it can really benefit our students. And so, sorry. Take it away, Lisa.
That's right. So just here, we just want to touch on, if you've been, it sounds like you've all been here in Alaska and Uktiavik, I'm sure you have, guys have, at least witnessed some really amazing athleticism of our Native youth in the Native Youth Olympics. You can see here, looks like the 1 foot high kick there, is that right? Or maybe it's yoga, but just thinking about relationships being so central. As we work with our families and our students, it's really core to the being, it's just once you are able to connect with those kids, you have some sort of a relationship, making it a safe space for learning, they will be able to really focus on that learning. You will understand if they are the type of students who need a lot more support, maybe experiencing trauma, you will understand how to maybe what some of the triggers are and how to regulate them so that they can get to that place of learning. But you get that by really focusing on your core, practicing and building, intentionally building those relationships with your students and your families.
Thanks, Lisa. And this is particularly important now. So as we talk about stress, as we talk about trauma, as we talk about how families are somewhat out of sync. And additionally, I also hear from some of you, hey, I'm also feeling stressed and I'm also in this place of where it's really hard. And so stepping back and really focusing in on relationships is what we are recommending. And the reason why is because trauma is this overwhelming feeling. It can leave us isolated, and it can leave us feeling like we can't trust others. And some of our families are really experiencing that, or they carry that with them from previous experiences. And so when we experience good relationships, some of the other things we can overcome. We can get to linking to learning. We can really check our cultural responsive work to make sure that it is working for our students. So when we are starting with relationships, especially right now, so some families are transitioning back into the classroom. Some families are going to be transitioning back in the fall, but either way, times of change can be times of stress and can be those times where families are stressed and overwhelmed. And so starting with relationships for our traumatized families and youth is really important. And it's also important for all of our families right now because there's such high levels of stress for them at the moment. So we're recommending to start with relationships and to try to do so in a way that is systematic. And so we'll talk more about how to do that. And what we also see is that when we do have high quality nurturing caregivers and relationships, it can change the structure of our brain. And it's not that it changes the structure, it changes the pathways that we have in our brains. It also makes learning possible. So one example I kind of heard recently is a few of our colleagues went up to go skiing. And so it was like they hadn't skied in a long time, they're adults. And so one of our colleagues was doing really, really well. And so the teacher was like, oh, actually try it this other way, you know? And so what he was noticing is that his fear and the fact that he had kind of these two thoughts in his mind. He was trying to like do what the teacher was saying. He wasn't leaning on what he knew. That fear of falling made him nervous and actually unable to learn. It kind of freaked him out, and he kind of started falling and was just like, that really messed me up. And that fear of falling, because the teacher was like, hey, if you keep doing things that way, you're going to fall or whatever's going to happen, actually stopped the learning. And then he said, and then I saw like 2 3-year-olds on my right and left skiing and snowboarding and doing these amazing things without that fear. And they were doing amazing. They weren't afraid to fall. And so when we have those nurturing relationships, we're not afraid of learning. We can actually have learning happen. And so this is why it's so important. And so my sister's also a teacher, and what she finds is that sometimes when she communicates things with families, they don't remember the next time she talks to them because they were in that fear of like, teacher's here, I'm really scared I'm going to get things wrong. And then the next time they talk, all of that was actually blanked out, and it was the fear. So she realized if I take like a few minutes before we go into our conversation, things actually go better, the things I'm trying to communicate. So this is why that relationship piece is so important, especially now. So, and Lisa's got kind of another way to kind of bring this forward. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah. On this, I will basically, actually, I'm going to add in a little piece since we had mentioned this. I think the co-regulation works for think about it for yourself. We've been working with a lot of teachers at the beginning of the year. We had talked a bit about self-care and using that mask analogy on the plane, having to regulate yourself before you can regulate others. So I just wanted to kind of quickly remind yourself of that. Not only is it okay, I would say it's necessary. Because, to be able to help others, you need to be in a calm space. And we all are feeling stressed, right? But I have done this thing with some of the staff where I'm like, we know you're busy, we know you're stressed, but if you can even take a minute or two in between your sessions to just stop and do a breathing exercise. They also have a lot of research showing that connection of breathing and calming, and take a few deep calming breaths to calm yourself, to regulate yourself, so that you're in a place where you can help your students and your families, especially if you know you're going to be having a stressful conversation, just centering yourself first, because they will feel that and you will feel that if you can be more calm. But the idea is helping your students and your families get to this calming place. As Claudia had mentioned, they if they're kind of in this survival mode, if they're not feeling safe, but if you can help them calm, acknowledge them, make a connection, get some of that oxytocin flowing and having some sort of a relationship and trust, then they can start sharing things with you. You know, I think one of the saddest things I'm hearing about is a lot of, I think we have families who are experiencing trauma on top of trauma. Like they were probably already experiencing a fair amount of ACEs before the pandemic, and now the pandemic has exacerbated that through more sickness. Some of them have had losses of family, loss of jobs, which then impacts, you know, everything from food security to homes. And so just recognizing that everyone is feeling this, and so helping, you're going to probably have to do this a fair amount, especially as you transition back in, but certainly for everyone. So, you know, if you feel like you're not quite connecting, maybe take a moment just to stop and just recognize and take a moment to connect with them, um, uh, you know, and relate with them. And then once you do that, then you can get to this place where you can get to their rational brain, you know, so their lid is not flipped, and do some learning or have some real good partnership conversations of how to support the kids.
Thanks, Lisa. And, you know, maybe for you that looks a little different. You might not take a breath in between, but maybe you like do a little bit of beading, or um, you know, and I won't tell you what my sister does. She has like this coloring book, but it's actually filled with like bad words. And so sometimes she'll just like cover a little bit before she has to call the next patient. She's a nurse. Uh, but it helps her to calm down. And it's just really funny. She's like, I never know what to do with them after. Do I shred them or what do I do? But anyway, what we do want to go into this conversation with knowing is that you value your relationships with your students, that you're already spending a lot of time really thinking about this and cultivating this, and that we'll talk about what EMR is, but that you already are doing some practices to be able to connect with them and to really see what they're experiencing in their lives and in their homes. We're also assuming that you're here to get better, and to improve at some of those relationships and maybe be more intentional and to do it with an equity lens. And we also are assuming that it would help for us to have this space and for us to have this conversation. And that if there were some concrete steps or some tools for you to use to apply this lens. So we're assuming we're in this room with a lot of experts. And so we look forward to that learning to happen with each other and amongst yourselves as well. And so equitable relationship building. So if relationships are key to linking to learning and to good outcomes, then we must, as educators, make an effort to make sure that those relationships are available to all of our students. And when those are available, and you can hear this educator reflect on that, we are better able to tune into the students' needs, whether they are able to verbalize them or not. We are more in tune with their needs. And so that's something that can really, really help us, having those tools that can ensure we have equitable relationships with all of our students. And so the next tool that we'll be looking at is a tool that can help you think about, or at least break down. Sometimes it's like a big mystery. Why am I able to connect with this student or this particular family, but not others? And so this is a tool that can really help you break down the relationship that you have. So which of the relationships, maybe you can think about either your classroom or your families. But which of these relationships do you need to establish? They don't exist yet. You are new, they are new. And which relationships do you need to maintain? There's something you already have built, but relationships don't maintain themselves. There's some things that we have to do there, even when there's an existing relationships. And then there's some relationships that we may need to restore. And is it because maybe you've done something wrong? I don't know. I mean, there's times when we definitely can be misunderstood or make some mistakes or something. And so how do we restore? What practices do we have for some of that? And then I'll also mention that for some students and for some families, it wasn't you that did something wrong, but maybe they've had so many bad experiences within the educational system that you may need to take some practices to restore that relationships. So it's different than establishing. You may take different approaches than establishing for somebody who hasn't had the greatest experience in education. And so we thought this tool could help you really think about what you are doing to establish, maintain, or restore your relationship, and to maybe think about things a little bit more systematically. So we're going to take just a little bit of reflection time at this point.
Yep. And we're going to go ahead and give you a few moments to think about this. So the EMR, it's really just a simple, sometimes it helps to have these simple acronyms. I know that education is so full of them, but, I'll just make a quick note too, though, that this, you could also think about how you could do this even with your colleagues, among each other as you are doing this work. But today our focus is families and students. And so take a couple minutes. We're going to, you can turn off the camera, which so many of you already have off, but take some notes. We'll set a timer, but we give you 2 minutes and think about, what are you already doing? What are you doing now to either, if you have new students, establish relationships? Maybe there's some families you haven't heard from yet or that are new to you. What are you doing to maintain for those students that you have that are ongoing, those families that maybe you've had for a while? And what are you, do you feel like maybe there's some restoring that you need to do? Are there families that, as Claudia mentioned, you're not hearing from them at all? And maybe maybe it came in, started out that way, and we don't know why, but we can imagine that this family has learned a practice of not being engaged. And for whatever reason, maybe there's something that you can do to help rebuild and restore that relationship. So what are you already doing? Give you a couple minutes to think about that.
All right, everyone.
All righty. So hopefully you've given some thought to that. And actually, we will, thinking on time, maybe do we want to go ahead and go right into the breakouts? And do you want me to explain that? Or do we want to take a few moments here? You can use that as pre-thinking. You're giving yourself some time to think about what are those relationships that you have, that you're doing some EMR, some establish, maintain, restore. If you're back here with me, I can't see you, but I think that you are listening. We're going to go into, do we need to do a breakout? Because we're right about the right size. So maybe we just go ahead and do that in this group together. But we will take 15 minutes where you can work through these 3 questions. And what we'd like you to do, remember what we're assuming about you. We're assuming that you have good intentions, that you want to intentionally rebuild, work on those relationships with your students. So all of those things, and we know that you need more time, but that aside, think about the relationships, the EMR, and think to yourself, the first question, what are your low-hanging fruit? Like, which relationships come easy to you? Who are you already connecting with, right? So those are probably the ones where you're doing that maintaining, right? And then what relationships you feel like are a little more challenging? Think about those families and students, like, okay, they're there, they are connecting, but I kind of have to work at that a bit. So who are those for you. And then the last question we have for you is to think about the patterns that you see on who you're connecting with and who seems to be a struggle for you. And what role do you think trauma plays in that? So we'll give you maybe a minute or two to think about that individually. You can think about those questions, but then we'd like you to go together and have that conversation with each other. And I think it will be very interesting and insightful. We have classroom teachers and counselors all in here, so there should be an interesting discussion as you think about your relationships with your families. Who are the easy ones? Who are a little more challenging? And what patterns do you see? And what role do you think trauma plays? And Claudia has put them. Would you like them to go into a breakout room, or should we have them here?
No, I do think it's nice to have some space to connect with each other and kind of have that conversation. So let's do a quick breakout, and maybe we'll be back in about 15 minutes or so.
All right.
We won't join you. We'll just let you all kind of share your expertise together, and then we look forward to hearing what you talked about.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any questions from folks before we break you out? Sounds like we're breaking you out of jail.
Just as a reminder, Claudia put these questions as well in the chat, so you can make sure to see it when you go into your breakout room in the chat.
Okay, and I've got the chats open for 15 minutes, and then they'll automatically bring you all back. And we'll see you in a little bit. If you have any trouble connecting, let me know, and I'll try and redirect you where you need to be.
Thanks, Tyler.
Great. How much of our interesting dialogue?
Oh, you got muted, Lisa.
Sorry, I can't type and, all right. So what strategies? Oh, well, you know, so we were talking in your group, you were talking about what relationships are easy, which ones needed some, needed a bit of a, you know, that were a little bit more challenging for you, and then wondering whether you saw a pattern and what role you thought trauma plays. So how did your conversation go there? Would you like to share out some juicy bits? And it's nice to see you. Hello. Nice to see you all. Good morning. Good morning. I see all your bright, shiny faces. Maybe a little more awake now.
So what were some of those relationships that come easy to you? Let's start off with maybe just the first question.
The kids.
Yes.
Working with the students. Yeah, and that's what the kids and the parents have always, I mean, like, that's why you're there. I think it's all the cohorts and colleagues with limited communication and different pathways of learning how to communicate effectively, and nothing really being effective in communication, working with a team, that is challenging. But man, working with the kids and being able to see them face to face has been really great. And that's always been easy.
That's why we're here. That's why we do it. Mm-hmm. How about for you, Margie? What relationships are a little bit easier for you?
I think just me being able to understand and listen to parents and offer them ideas, strategies on how to work with their little kids at home, giving them moral support. Just myself, remind myself this is a new day. I'll have positive attitude, even though there are times when I think, gee, what's gonna happen? We think, I think about these, it's a challenging time for all of us teachers, and we're in a big school. There's 35 teachers here, and we have a bunch of, we have 2 school nurses, And here at this elementary school, it's the biggest elementary. I think in Alaska, we have almost 700 elementary students from ECE, early childhood, to fifth grade. And then there's Hobson Middle School, and there's Barrow High School, and then there's Akita Learning Center. So we have 4 schools. And we have 8 school buses. But not all my students are coming back. Some parents are keeping them home. And then, so I'm gonna have to find, when I'm teaching a lesson in here, I'm gonna have to record myself, because as grade level, we collaborate a lot and share ideas, which helps.
Thanks so much for sharing that. How about for you, Deborah? Are there any relationships that feel a little easier for you?
There are definitely relationships that are easier with this job, opposed to the 2 other ones. We have the whole gambit. We have so many parents coming in and going out, but the ones that take the least amount of time are the families who are homeschooling because they want to homeschool. They're not homeschooling because they have found no success with the remote learning. So I get families that are coming in and saying, my child has straight Fs, we're Zooming all the time. Those are the tough ones, or a little more tough. And I have parents that'll just say, I am not a teacher. And then one parent just goes, I'm a truck driver. One mother was like, what are you talking about? Like, okay, well, this is what we can do to make it easier. And I was just sharing in the group. So just staying on topic, the relationships are that are easiest. And I get off the Zoom meeting with the parents and feel like, okay, those kids are getting more than they're getting in the classroom. The other ones that I feel good about are the parents who are making these little cohorts and these little mini schools. So they have like 5 families and they get together, and then they're taking turns and they have that support. That makes me feel really good. I wish more families had like a strong leader and then could join with those 3 families or something. I feel like there's too many. Anyway, those are the easy ones. I'll stay there.
Thanks so much, Deborah. How about for you, Amaret?
Well, I shared with the group that because my position is a little bit different, I'm not a classroom teacher. I go in as a guest speaker. I felt like these questions did not apply to the students, but for me, they may be more applied with partner agencies. And so where I have struggled is, we all talked about all the technology skills we've developed. We all know about the obstacles, slow internet, even just one day, even if you know what you're doing, just one day can throw you off. Well, so many of the clients with these partner agencies, they don't have internet, they don't have a device. Maybe they are at a shelter and the shelter only has a computer or Wi-Fi in the office for the staff. So I have not been able to reach a lot of my clients. And that's been really hard because I have no way to maintain and restore. There is just not a possibility, and I can't go in person. So what I did was I reached out to classroom teachers and just said, hey, I'm here for you as a resource, whether I can Zoom into your classes for an education series or not, what can I do for you? But if I had not already had established relationships with classroom teachers, I think I would have been twiddling my thumbs for a year. In our program, there were some nutrition educators who are newer, and I really felt for them because they have had to go try and drum up participants. And I'm really fortunate in that I've done this long enough. I have those relationships established. So for me, it was about maintaining, even though it looked very, very different. And I think one of the things that might make what I do easier than for some of you is that, and I shared this with the group, trauma doesn't really play in for me as much. I mean, obviously, if I'm with a group of clients from a traumatic background, and that's what put them in that agency and in my path, that's a known entity. However, when I go into a classroom, every child is the same. I don't like it when the teachers warn me, who are the kids with ADHD? Who are the kids with, high functioning autism? I try to read the room and let every kid have a fresh start, and it's pretty successful. So I think in some of the opposite ways, trauma doesn't play in, but that's only because I'm getting them in these brief little windows. So I have so much respect for those people who have to nurture those children and get to nurture those children through all those more difficult circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for sharing that perspective. And thank you for kind of really thinking through your own situation and how you might think about relationships. And there's a slide here that we'll cover. But this is really a great activity to think through maybe your partnerships or the relationships you have with your colleagues as well. So if those relationships are key to you being able to be impactful, then taking a systematic approach to that too. Who am I able to connect to really well? And, how do I make that happen maybe for other teachers so that their students, I'm able to really tap into that for those students. So thanks all. And you all kind of touched on a little bit, Lisa, we may not spend too much time here. But you all have shared a few strategies that help you to reach those that you struggle with. And so I just want to encourage you to continue to figure that out. Who are those folks that you are struggling to connect with? What strategies might you use? And one thing that we also ask at times, and we didn't have time to do this today, is for you all to think through your students or your relationships through the MTSS model. So what are the needs of that top tier, those families that we really cannot reach? What are those needs, and how do we address them? And then what are the things that we're doing that are universal, that are for everyone, so that all students have that access to relationship? Anything you'd like to add here, Lisa?
I was thinking about one example, but I might keep it for after break. We have one tool that we're going to share, I think, after the break. Is this we're going to plan to take a break?
We can definitely share it after the break. Let's take a little break.
Yeah, so I will save that example for that.
Okay.
All right. So we did build in a bit of a break. Thank you for sharing and for connecting and giving thought to that. And we're going to provide some tools to kind of get to it a little more systemically. So we will be taking a bit of a break here.
So let's come back at 9:30. Take a 7-minute break, go stretch, get a drink, and we'll come back and maybe give you a couple tools that you can use to do this systematically, and then go into a few other pieces as well.
Hydrate, whatever it takes to get through this last half hour together. So thank you so much. So we finished and you guys had a great little connection conversation thinking about establish, maintain, and restore. And again, you can think of that with your students, with your families, with staff. And so one of the examples I thought about, if we can go to the next slide, we're just going to try to pop right into the next one. Here's one of the tools that you can use. Thinking of getting it more systematically. There are two examples I'd like to share with this. One is, if you know about Zaretta Hammond, she does a fair amount of cultural response teaching type work. And she was talking about how she encouraged her teachers to use a log, something like this. I changed one of the columns, but basically this is it. And, and pretty much all the teachers were feeling like, yeah, I talk to all of my students or my families and, but she's like, okay, well, still do this log, kind of like the way we, if you're trying to lose weight, they encourage you to log what you eat. And sometimes you're surprised, right? Anyway, So putting this here, putting it, so that way you remove the, you make it objective and you make sure to keep track. And what one of her teachers, when he came back and connected, he was so surprised. He says, I swear, there was this, I felt like I was talking to all the students and even, but when he discovered is that, like maybe with one of the students, he had only had corrective type conversations with them. So that's not going to do much to build a relationship, right? And then we realized with some of his quieter students, the students who do really well, he was so busy working with maybe the ones who were more high energy, needing more corrective, but there were students he wasn't engaging with very well or very little. And so something about keeping a log, just makes it objective, can make it such a simple thing. And then you can keep little notes to yourself of what you can do to do that. One thing I will take as another example is I thought about a high school last spring. One of our school districts at a high school, the principal encouraged their teaching staff to take a look at their student logs before parent-teacher conferences. And she said, know all the families you have not heard from yet this year. Now I want you to, they came up with this list of families and they said, okay, I want each of you to take 10 names off of that list. They kind of divvied it up and let's make a personal contact to each of these families and invite them. And of course, as you can imagine, if I would ask you, what do you expect happened? What happened was exactly what you might expect happened. Something about getting that personal contact invitation from a teacher. Nearly every family that they contacted came to that parent-teacher conference last spring. And those were the families that they had not had any engagement yet. They hadn't called, they didn't come to the last parent-teacher conference, but something about intentionally creating a log and reaching out to every one of them and inviting them made that difference. So those are two different ways I was thinking and stories when just this simple tool of helping you track who are you tracking, connecting with and how. And then also, once you realize you're not interacting with some, then what kind of corrective thing can you do for yourself, to help work on that restore part or build. So there's that. And then the next. For an extension activity, taking it a bit farther, once you work on it yourself, you may want to, I know in various school districts, they have in-service dates or staff meeting times. So at a staff meeting time, you can answer the EMR questions for yourself, but then share it with your staff. Share the EMR tool and the log with the staff. And then answer those, you might want to encourage that to be something that you guys could do as a staff together, try to make it more systematic you can start in your classroom and maybe build it out to the whole school. So that was one suggestion that we had for you.
Thanks, Lisa. So a couple more tools for you to about whatever feels like it might make sense for you. And so thinking about now through those relationships and hopefully a little more systematic relationships, how do we do more to link to learning and link that learning to family in place? And why do we do this work? Why do we link to learning? And what we know is that across all of this research, and we can look at each one and pick it up and say this is the connection for here. But across all of these research and in different examples, we know that when we link what's happening for students in their lives and what they already know to the learning that we're doing, it can really help increase that learning. It can help increase that trust and that growth students have. So it's kind of like leaping from one thing to another. We're not expecting them to leap from an unknown foundation. They leap from what they know to something that they're learning. And so we know that our brains do much better when we have that approach. And so that's why when we look at family partnerships, linking to that learning is really important. But to know our families, we have to build those relationships and really get to know them, which is what we spent a little bit of time on. So then once we have those relationships, what all of the research is saying is that families and place provide context and stickiness. So it makes that learning get stuck to something that's already in there, and it provides context. Why might this be important for us? And so as we go through a set of different ways that you can link families to learning, we want you to consider this question. What are you doing already to link families to learning? And could what you're doing be stretched out a little bit to include some of the elements that we're going to mention in here? And we'll talk more about what they are, but just thinking about what you're doing and if there's a stretch that you could take in your practice to include some of these other things that we will mention. And so we know that families already share knowledge and have a lot of shared experiences to build on. And so how could you use that knowledge that's already there to build what you are doing? And you're probably already doing this, but how could you maybe stretch out a little bit more? What do you have for us, Lisa?
Yeah, well, and so this probably isn't such a stretch. You're thinking about Alaska, we always like to think of ourselves as exceptional, but, definitely if there is a state and a place, this is a state with a lot of Alaska indigenous knowledge, Alaska history knowledge, and we know that a lot of curriculum, for better or worse, often these packaged curriculum come with very different context, so our kids are talking about, farms, and some places in the state do have some farms, but many do not, and so I know of one teacher who, instead of having, the examples were elephants and monkeys, she made them bears and berries, just thinking about tying it to our seasons and our harvests, and families, already do some of that harvesting together. And so it just provides that context where, like, oh, okay, I know this makes sense. It's called chunking, as Retta calls it, chunking, of taking something that they don't know and connecting it to something that they do. And one way you can do that is just remembering that your families, if you are doing some of that local place-based knowledge, your families will be able to connect with you on it, and they have some knowledge in that area and can support that learning with you. Going to the next. Here, this is just a little snapshot. Many of our districts, I think 34 of them out of 50, currently take the school climate connectedness survey. So this is one of those questions broken down that we included. But my child's teacher makes an effort to represent my family's culture and lessons. And here you can see it looks like most of the districts overall, this is participating Alaska districts, could stand to do a bit more, right? Maybe just a little over half, and less than half in some other areas. So just pointing out, it looks like, if anything else, just think of it as room to grow.
And if I could add one thing here, Lisa, it might be difficult in a bigger community to think about, like, well, my families are pretty diverse. Which of my families, how do I do some of this work? And some of the guidance we've read is really doing things. A lot of cultures are more collectivist cultures. So if you do things more collectively, you might be able to really account for and do things in those cultural ways for many of the families in your school. And it might help a lot. So like for my immigrant family, we did things together. We were pretty collectivist in the way that we did things. So even if that was present in the classroom, my particular history may not have felt so important if like a group way of accomplishing things was present in the classroom. So there may be some ways for you to think about your families in a way that that helps them without feeling like I've got to create like a lesson plan for every family group or that kind of thing. But we can talk more about that. Sorry, Lisa, I just wanted to add that piece, that there are some ways that you can include the how and in the way that you do your teaching that can really help certain groups of students and families.
Thank you. Here, we were just underscoring how does your lesson plan objectives actually link to learning? And I guess the idea of linking to learning, as I think back on myself with my kids in the classrooms, it wasn't essential that I suddenly had to relearn all of the Alaska history and government and, mathematics. It did help to kind of get little refreshers, but I didn't really have to become an expert. All it took was, for me, getting little tidbits from the teachers, like, oh, this week we're studying, some of the different, this in math, and so you might want to just give your parents just enough that they could kind of quiz and check in with their kids, like, oh, what are you guys covering again in math, and how is that working for you, and explain how do you know that, what are the types of solutions, give them some questions, some reflective questions, and just another hint of what you're working on that week so that they can help you reinforce that learning, because that is also part of the learning. So you provide the content, but the other part of that learning is for kids then to practice retrieving. They call it that retrieval. So that's where it becomes, goes from that short term to long term. So that's where you can really pull in your parents. If you help give your parents just enough information that they can help reinforce that at home. So whether it be through newsletters, occasional newsletters, heads up, this is the content that we're going to be covering in the next week. And if you ask your kids these questions, it will help them remember and retain it better.
Thanks, Lisa. And really what I think is a huge one is to build those lessons on family routines. So, families are going to go shopping, or they have certain things that they do together already. And so it may not be that you need to fit in an extra thing, right? Like, we all get a lot of stress when we have something else to do or include in our work that we didn't expect. But if we can build it as part of a routine, so those lessons can say, who did you interact with this week at home, or how many people were in your household, how much food, like there could be, what did you eat, or what did you buy at the store, what was the price for things, how did you apply an 18% tax? That's what we have here in Juneau. What's the 18% tax that you would add on top of this bill here, for your family? So there may be some real ways that you can build into the routine that they're already doing. So a family doesn't have to figure out a new place to fit things in, but they can fit them into their routines. The other piece that we have found that can really work off of existing knowledge is to solve local issues. What are some things that families are dealing with in the community? And we've seen science experiments or science research that students have done on the soil is eroding, and the water is doing this in our community, and we've known that, but here's the data, here's what it actually plays out to be. And students are inherently interested in a project or in an issue that they are experiencing. And the other piece is that as you do this work, you may need to adjust the materials and the content that you are using. And so you may think like, gosh, that sounds like a lot, but work with your partners, work with the folks that either parents or colleagues. There may be some help that you get, and it may not even be that you have to change everything, but it may be that you change the framing at the beginning, or the questions that you use, or the activity that this is regarding. And so make those adjustments, but do so in a partnership. And then use familiar language. So this is a big one. I did violence prevention for a really long time with young people in schools. And we spent a long time trying to get schools to accept our language of, we're doing violence prevention. And schools are like, we can't do any extra stuff. We have told you, it is too much. We've got so much on our plates. But when we changed our language to say, this is student wellness work, it helps with their SEL and relationship skills. And they said, oh, great, that's what we're doing already. We actually need some extra help. And it was the same work. And so it was me, it was us. It wasn't the schools. They had a serious barrier that they were trying to get past. And once they saw that actually we were a helpful hand to get across that barrier, everything shifted. And we were able to do the work, same work. So the other piece is really creating some place-based and project-based learning, setting the context in the community, having entire activities kind of formed in this way. And if you ever need some help doing this work, Tyler's your man. You know, because it's about kind of fitting all the pieces together, as opposed to adapting something that you already have. And one thing that both me and Lisa wanted to cover is the piece around equity. So even though we're saying this is a place-based activity and using knowledge and things that are already existing in the community, there may still be some materials that are associated with the things that you are hoping families will do. And I remember growing up and not having very much, and things that felt like a neutral request on the part of my teacher became either huge issues at home. My parents could not understand. Nobody had explained to them why I needed to bring boxes of tissue to school. I didn't know how to explain it either, right? I'm an immigrant kid. They don't understand why that's happening. And the teacher just put out a neutral request. All the other families brought them in. And at my home, we had to struggle for hours to understand this request and then go to the store and do all of these different things. And it felt unequal. That request was not equal. I also remember building a diorama for like a presentation. And my mistake was bringing it in a day early. I brought it in the day before the presentation. Now, why was that a mistake? It's because all the other kids in my class were like, wow, you could do a diorama for the presentation. Great. And they did their dioramas and they were 50 times better than mine because their parents helped. They had supplies. I was drawing on cardboard and I was trying to stick things and like, it just was not looking great, but I had a great idea. And the next day, actually my diorama looked the worst on the day of the presentations because all the other students were able to pull together things with much better supplies. So we don't want this to become an equity issue. We don't want this to be an issue for our families and students.
Right. Well, I think a similar thing is just the science project. You know, I remember I was so grateful when my kids had a teacher and she reminded the parents, by the way, these are, they had to do a science project, you know, with a poster board presentation, which by the way is yet another equity issue. It's like, you know, do the parents have the money? Do they have the time to go there? Did you give them enough notice to that? You know, some of them don't have cars or transportation.
And my mom didn't know what a poster board was.
Yeah.
I didn't either, actually.
Having a printer, you know, being able to do the computer and research things and print things out, you know, not all students have that. Just a matter of just keeping it in mind. But also, I was so appreciative of this one teacher who just said, by the way, this is your kids' project. It should look like your kids' project. Some of them coming in looking pretty professional, and we know parents are helping and mean well. But, you know, the point of this is for your kid to learn and to practice. So it's okay if they come in looking a little rough. They're third grade. It should look like a third grader made it, you know, and that's okay. And that is the whole point of this. But some of them clearly had parents who were well intended and put in a lot of extra time, and it wasn't really necessary and needed. But just thinking about that equity piece there. Thank you. So, you know, just thinking about it, what prompts do or will you use in your lesson plans to link families to learning? Just keeping, again, instead of the call log, think about it in having some sort of a chart like this, where you can, a table like this, where you can think about and plan, intentionally plan, where can I tie in some of these different places, parent, you know, and the local learning, and make some ways to connect and make it sticky for our kids, and to use some of their real life experiences at home where they could tie in. Also, last week, as we were working with our family engagement group, our educators, you know, one of the teachers said, you know, I think too, one of the things she does is at the beginning of the year, she asks the teachers, I mean, her families, where do you know, what kind of things, what kind of special skills do you have or areas of interest do you have that you would like to help? You know, are there anything in the year, you know, that where I can maybe call on you? You know, there's some people who do some harvesting, some who do sewing, some who are really good with storytelling. And so she kind of kept a little log of that, so when she did something like this and mapped it out, she would have like a little resource list of her parents thinking, oh yeah, great, this parent offered to help in this way. And so also a little pre-planning might help you as you fill this out when you start off with some of your families to maybe invite and ask what interests do they have or skills that they have that they would like to help with.
Thanks, Lisa. So we've shared a lot. And I hope that as we were sharing, you were kind of keeping track of what you're doing and maybe picking up some ideas for maybe stretching that out or adding a new element. So we thought we could just do a pretty easy close here and hear a little bit from you on what was shared. Any kind of revelation for you that took place over this time together? So maybe take a second and reflect on this. I used to think, and now I think.
I think one of the things that my brain is like, okay, keep paying attention, but then it just had me focusing on all these ideas that I can do with my work. Because this is a first year job for me, I've taught, kindergarten through 5th grade for 32 years. So it's like a whole different ballgame. Finding out where I can make the most impact as a homeschool educator. But I like that idea of establish, maintain, restore only, or because I really like the idea of saying, I can make sure that I had a Zoom meeting. I'm going to establish what can I use, what resources, and I just kind of was like jotting down little ideas for each of those 3 things. And it's been in my head. It just hasn't really been organized. As I did, if I know I'm getting the job next year, it's like, okay, these are all big projects that I need to work on to make it easier and maintain and establish relationships that make homeschooling really easy for these parents. So I like those 3 words. I think it's a really good thing for teachers to continually think about.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Deborah. Anything come up for other folks as you were listening in? How about for you, Margie, or Julie, or Amaret?
I guess I'll go. I thought of ways that I could, I don't want to say be more inclusive because I already tried to do that, but this gave me some ideas of specific things my brain started percolating on. I'm already doing some of these things, but it gave me some ideas of ways I could expand upon those. And I like the thing about the resources because one of the lessons actually in our youth curriculum that I'm required to use is teaching children to ask parents for to buy fruits and vegetables. And I have really struggled with that. That seems very presumptuous to me. We have a lot of families who cannot do that. And so I've put a lot of thought into how can I teach children to ask this question that equalizes what might be going on at home. And so I've tried to do it and let them know, you have to be willing to try something new. If your parents are going to honor that request, you really have to commit to eating it. They don't want to waste their money. And pardon me. So it got me thinking about that particular thing in a broader range too. How can we think more about what's going on at home when we're only seeing little pieces of it? So just my brain's percolating in a lot of different directions. Thank you for the information and the inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And I wonder too, if you could start with sometimes we start with kind of what we've done here is what are you already doing? So maybe you already do this, you all are doing so much. So I'm sorry if I'm assuming here, this may not help or it may help, but maybe asking what is your favorite meal that you already do have that has a vegetable that you like in there, and maybe starting from there and saying, why do you think you all buy this one but not others? Or I don't know, there might be like a conversation around what they already have or do or see to build off of. So I'm sure you do some of those things already. Thanks so much for sharing. And Julie, I saw you unmute.
I think it's a good reminder for me when you're doing program development and providing the specific intervention, not to kind of get in your own way. In program development, your mindset is very much what could go wrong, which can create like this level of anxiety. And a perfect example was that is like at a client who was never able to communicate with her mother. They spoke 2 different languages, you know, and from a perspective of organization where we have access to all of these translators and things like that, rather than relying on how they identified healthy communication, I was already coming up with all these other options for them. So again, recognizing my role in the program management piece and systems and how we can be effective and efficient and continue to provide good service in schools, but then also reminding myself that I'm also providing individual service and being able to switch between those hats. So this was a very good conversation. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Julie.
Can be anxiety producing, can't it? You know, for all your planning. And I think that nothing else, I feel like so many people got a lesson on how to do the best you can with planning, and then also be open and prepared for plan B and plan C. You know, part of it is pandemic for sure. The other part is technology, and then the families and everything they're bringing. There's so much less in our control. And I think if nothing else, I'm tended to be a hyper planner, and now I'm just like, okay, well, I think this is good enough, and it's probably enough that we'll just adjust as we go, and getting a little comfortable with that, which can be really hard for some people, myself included. So thank you for being willing to talk about that.
How about for you, Margie? Did anything come up for you?
Gee, for up here, I would just think at home, because I'm not really watching what goes on at home, but I'm pretty sure just from hearing what my kids used to always share with me and tell me, and I know how it is for all Native families. I'm a Native. I'm from the Bristol Bay area. Anyway, and I remember similar to how we live. I mean, the kids up here, they love to help their families out at home, from gathering, preparing, hunting, and subsistence foods. And here it's a whaling community, and kids just love to help their families at home. And sharing of the muktuk, always preparing different ways, sharing recipes on how to use muktuk or whale meat, how to cook it, and just being creative. And they love to share and help out at home. That's all I can think about. But, and then they bring that into the classroom. And of course, all our schools here are surrounded by their culture. And I incorporate a lot of their Inupiat values into my lessons every day. And it's around their culture. Just enhancing the curriculum we're required to use by the state.
Yeah, there's a lot of strength for our students and things that they're already doing with their families. So it sounds like you're really building off of those, and really linking to those ways of being in the family, because students have so many strengths and families do too. So starting from there and building off of that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I wanted to share this little form out with you all. The information that was shared today obviously came from some of our experiences as well, but it also comes from this resource that I mentioned earlier. The form there's a online digital version, which you're free to use, free to share, and you can find that at that second link there. But if you fill out the form, there's a family partnership book study that will be taking place this spring. And we are able to mail some printed versions of this framework if you're interested. So take a look at the digital version, see if that's something you might want to use. And if you think a printed version would help you, we're more than happy to share that out too. So I just wanted to share where we got the information from and where you all could kind of look to if you needed more.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Deborah.
Thank
And
you.
so, thank you all so much.
Good to see you all. It was wonderful to have you, a small and mighty group, but I think you guys were able to connect, and we hope that you guys got some tools, and we hope that you're able to connect with your families in some really good, meaningful ways. So thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Feel free to reach out if you have any more questions or if you want to connect with us more about engaging with families.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.